All right. Hey, YouTube, I'm Lucky, and the Igneous Hammer is dropping at 3 wins this week in Trials. So many people are going to be getting it, so I wanted to make a full guide, so that way whenever you get the roll that you do, you can come to this guide right here, you can look at the perks you have, and you can tell for yourself whether or not you have a god roll, because so often, so many people come to me and like, hey, is this a god roll? Hey, is that a god roll? So on and so forth. And I made this guide right now to make it so much easier for you, so that way you don't have to ask me or wait on me to respond. You can decide for yourself using this video, using this image that's up here. So starting from the top, I'm going to analyze every perk and let you know why I rated it where I did. So with Fluted Barrel, we get +5 stability and +15 handling. Now, a little bit of added stability can be nice if you're on a controller, but on mouse and keyboard, it's not that helpful. +15 handling and +5 stability with no downside, though, is really good. So I put this in the B tier category for that reason, because there are other barrels in this option here that can actually give you range and stuff like that, which is something you're definitely want to look forward to more so than handling and stability. Probably range, reload will be a lot better for you. Moving on down to the next one now, we have Small Bore, which gives +7 to range and +7 to stability. So I put this in the A tier category. If you're on controller, you're going to really like this one. If you're not on controller, this is still a great option because +7 range is awesome. Like I've mentioned before, 120 RPMs with really high range, hit headshots from a distance, even when you shoot people in the body. I don't know why it does that. It's just the way the game's designed, and it is largely tied to the range on the weapon. So you definitely want to have high range when you use these. Plus, you can just use them like scout rifles, essentially, and shoot people across the map when you have high range with the 120s, because they already come intrinsically with really high range. Moving on to the next one, we have Corkscrew Rifling, which again gives +5 range, +5 stability, and +5 handling. So an increase to handling and range is really nice for mouse and keyboard. And then the +5 stability is great for controller. So I put this in the A tier category, very strong. The next one up, we have Hammer Forged Rifling. I gave this one the S tier rating. This is +10 range, almost the highest range you could possibly get, and no downside at all. Hammer Forged Rifling, always amazing, always a great perk option. Next up, we have Arrowhead Brake, +10 handling, +30 recoil. Like I've mentioned before, these are great with pulse rifles, auto rifles, but for hand cannons, you can almost hardly ever see the increase in recoil. The +10 handling can be nice. It might feel a little bit better with controller. With the recoil, I'm not entirely sure. I'd have to test that out myself. But overall, I just gave this the B tier because it's nowhere near as good as the other barrels options. So moving on to the next one, though, we have Chambered Compensator, +10 stability, +10 recoil, and -5 handling. I put this in the C tier category because -5 handling on 120s is not going to feel very good at all. If you're on controller, getting that stability and recoil could be nice, but overall, losing out on that handling is not going to feel great on these 120 RPM hand cannons. They already have really poor handling intrinsically, so I put that in the C tier category. Moving on to the next one, though, we have Extended Barrel, +10 range, +10 recoil. That's awesome. -10 handling. Again, that losing out on that handling is not going to feel very good. I am going to give this in the A tier rating, though, because you could make up for that handling with the other perks. And if you can make up for that handling, that +10 range is going to feel really good. So I did put this in the A tier category. Next up, we have Full Bore, and Full Bore is S tier, the most range you can possibly get in the barrel. +15 range. It does come at a steep cost, though, -10 stability. Again, on mouse and keyboard, you're not going to notice that or care. On controller, that might bother you a little bit. And -5 handling is a very small downside to get a +15 range. Full Bore, definitely in the S tier category. We only got Full Bore and Hammer Forged in the S tier. They're very good for boosting the range of these 120s. Next up, we have Polygon Rifling, which is a +10 to stability. And I put this in the B tier category because this is good for controller, but this is not at all helpful at all for mouse and keyboard. So it's kind of in between, and so I put it in the B tier. Next up, in the second column over, I have Extended Mag at the very top, and I put this actually in the D tier category. And I know some of you might be saying, you're crazy, it gives +30 magazine, the biggest magazine boost you can get. But the problem is the downside is -20 reload speed, and 120s already have terrible reload speed. You don't want to be sitting there reloading that thing for a full 3 seconds. It's going to feel terrible. You don't want Extended Mag on these. Trust me, if you're going to go for a magazine perk, you're going to want to go for one like the next one that we have up here, which is Appended Mag. And Appended Mag I put in the A tier category, and even though this doesn't give as much magazine as Extended Mag, this does not have a downside, so that's why I put it in the A tier category. Moving on to the next one, we have High Caliber Rounds. I also put this in the A tier category because this does give a +5 to range, which is really what you're looking for when it comes to these magazine perks. That's the most range you can possibly get from them, is a +5 to range. And this one does have increased flinch, but it's been tested on these hand cannons that the increased flinch is almost not noticeable at all. So the increased flinch part of high caliber rounds is not that helpful, which is why I'm putting this into the A tier category. Moving on to the next one, we have Ricochet Rounds. Again, the same thing as before, +5 to range and +10 to stability. Now, if you're on controller, this is arguably S tier for controller, but on mouse and keyboard, that stability, again, it's not going to be as helpful. So I have to divide these things based on mouse and keyboard and controller, so that way everyone gets a fair representation of what they're looking for. Moving on to the next one, we have Alloy Magazine, which is faster reloads when the magazine is empty. I put this all the way down in the C tier. It is nice when you do empty your magazine out completely, but you don't want to be playing Crucible with that playstyle. You don't want to be emptying your magazine. And next up, we have Armor Piercing Rounds, which does give a +5 to range. Now, ordinarily, this is seen as a PvE perk, and it's definitely a lot more conducive to PvE. But because it does give a +5 to range, I'm going to put this as A tier with the other range boosting perks because it's definitely comparable to high caliber rounds. And the next two up are both S tier. We have Flared Magwell, +5 stability, +15 reload. I don't even need to say why this is so good. Obviously, 120s have terrible reload speed. +15 reload speed, amazing, +5 stability, amazing, especially for controller. The next one up, we have Light Mag with a +5 to range and a +10 to reload speed. Again, the same thing. You get that range boost, plus you get that reload. That's probably the best option overall. And then moving on to the last big perk slot. Thankfully, there's only 5 in each slot, unlike the bottom dollar, which has 12 in each slot. There's only 5, so getting the exact god roll you're looking for might be a little bit easier. At the very top, we have Rapid Hit, which I actually put in the A tier category. And the reason why is because when you're shooting these 120s, you're not necessarily always going for headshots. You don't need to land 3 shots to the head. So a lot of times you'll go for 1 to the head, 2 to the body, or 2 to the head, 1 to the body, depending upon the enemy's resilience. And so for that reason alone, Rapid Hit tends to work a lot better than Outlaw, which is just below it. Outlaw I put in the B tier category because you're going to have to finish the kill with the headshot for Outlaw to prog. Now, the reload speed is a lot better with Outlaw than it is for Rapid Hit. But again, landing a ton of headshots with 120s is totally unnecessary, and you're going to find a lot of people don't do that. They're going to go for 2 to the head, 1 to the body, etc. So I put Outlaw in B tier. Moving on to the next one, we have Subsistence, and I put this all the way down in the D tier category. Kills partially reload the magazine from reserves, which is a nice perk, but the problem is that the reserve capacity is reduced, and you can run out of ammo when you're doing 6s with this weapon. Obviously, if you're playing in trials, it's probably not going to happen, but if you are playing 6s at all, running out of ammo feels terrible when you run out of ammo in your primary weapon. So I put that in the D tier category for that reason alone. Not to mention, if you do get a kill with it, I think it refunds 1 bullet to the magazine, so the trade-off is just really not worth it at all. The next perk up, we have an S tier perk. This is Quick Draw. Your weapon can be drawn unbelievably fast. You can pull the weapon out fast. You can aim down sights a little bit faster. Quick Draw is the S tier and the go-to perk for this Igneous hammer. Next up, we have Killing Wind, and I put this in the A tier category. Still a very strong perk, but the fact that it requires you to get a kill in order for it to proc is not nearly as strong as Quick Draw. Final blows with Killing Wind grant increased mobility, weapon range, and handling for short duration. That's awesome. A very amazing perk. I definitely like Killing Wind, but it just doesn't stack up to Quick Draw as much, so I had to put this in the A tier category. Next up, in the last and final column, we have Rampage at the top, an S tier perk for 120 RPM hand cannons. You get a kill, and without reloading, you can literally 2-tap the next person that comes up to you. Super, super strong for 120s. I don't even need to explain why it's so good. The next one up is One for All, and One for All I actually put in the C tier category because you have to hit 3 separate targets in a very short window of time, and that is just so difficult to pull off inside Crucible. If you can pull it off, you get essentially a kill clip buff for 10 seconds, which would just be absolutely devastating. I mean, you would be running around for 10 seconds, 2-tapping everyone you see. But the problem is that the setup, hitting 3 separate targets in that short window of time is just way too difficult, and you're not going to be able to pull this off consistently, making this perk unfortunately not very viable for Crucible situations. This perk, One for All, works so much better in PvE. Shooting 3 red bar enemies is much easier and much more manageable. Moving on to the next perk, it is Snapshot, and I put this in the A tier category. Faster ADS time is really strong and always nice for any Crucible weapon. If you ADS and shoot someone before they shoot you, they will flinch, potentially making their shot miss. You always want to land the first shot whenever you're getting into a Crucible engagement, and Snapshot will help you aim down sights and land that shot just maybe a fraction of a second faster. Next up, we have the perk Moving Target. Now, this is great for controller. We have increased movement speed and target acquisition when aiming down sights. So this actually adds aim assist and adds better movement when ADSing. So if you're on controller, you might actually like this a lot, but it's honestly not nearly as strong as Rampage or Snapshot. And especially if you're on mouse and keyboard, you're not going to want to use this perk at all if you're on mouse and keyboard. But if you are on controller, this might actually be closer to the A tier for controller players. So definitely don't laugh at Moving Target for the Igneous hammer. And last up, the very last perk is Celerity, which only procs when you're the last living member of the fire team. It increased target acquisition, increased handling and reload speed, reduce flinch from incoming fire. While it is a very strong perk, waiting until you're the last living guardian on the fire team is not an ideal playstyle, because you could play the entirety of a game and for whatever reason you didn't end up being the last player any one of those given rounds. And so essentially you had a perk that didn't proc at all. Whereas with a perk like Snapshot, you will always get Snapshot to proc because anytime you ADS with your weapon, Snapshot is there. And with Rampage, anytime you get a kill, you will get Rampage to proc. So I had to put Celerity in the D tier category. Celerity, unfortunately, is a terrible perk. And lastly, in terms of masterworks for this weapon, we got Range Masterwork is in the S tier, Handling Masterwork A tier, Reload Masterwork A tier, and all other masterworks we put in the B tier category. That being said, if you're on controller, you might like that Stability Masterwork a little bit. And that's going to be a wrap for this video. Best of luck to you out there grinding those 3 wins for your Igneous Hammer. I hope you get the god roll you're looking for. No matter what roll you get, make sure to come back to this video and compare what roll you get to this video and see just how good it is. Make sure to subscribe with notifications on if you did enjoy this video. Smash the like button, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Later.